go.
Thank you so much. I think we're good. Yeah. Yeah, good to see you all. And thank you for giving me this opportunity to be able to just share some thoughts and views about Pearson College in 2021 and beyond. And thank you for showing a continued interest in your beloved college as we move forward. And I think the main purpose for this event is to make sure that we can try and address some of the questions that were forwarded to me and the team that came from you, about questions you had about life, about issues going on, and about the direction of the college. So we've got those in mind. So as I go through some of my thinking and I share my screen and go through some of the documentation that I think will be of interest, please do ask questions as we go through. You can see from Benoit in the chat that we can address things in the chat, but we will also have time to take questions at the end. But also, I think we will be able to address some of the points that we've already received. A lot of the questions that were forwarded to me from this group are to do with student well-being and safety, student agency and voice, mental health. All those issues, I think, are really a strong part of what I want to talk about in the second half. But yeah, Q&A will be probably really appropriate. For those of you who watch this on the recording as well, the other piece that I wanted to ask is that I really would value feedback from you as the representatives of Pearson alumni about the direction the college is going in. We're going through a process right now called a strategic refresh. We have a 5-year strategic plan, which is on our website, which is still the umbrella strategy. So we're just tweaking parts of that, focusing in on a few things. And so it's really important for us to get feedback from you guys. So please do that. You can email me directly. You can email Benoit. You can use whatever channels you wish to make sure that that feedback is heard so we can feed it into a redraft. We're not going to be finalizing this strategy until a wider board meeting in November. Okay, so I will just run through some of the priorities we've got in a document, and I'll share that with you. There's some images and some text, so excuse me for that. We'll give you the detail that I think you will want. And then we'll come off the document and we can just do some Q&A-ing as well. Let me just try and share my screen now. Can you all see that? Okay, yeah, so nothing too visually exciting, I'm afraid. But I think just to start with, I'll just say off the bat as part of our strategy, which I think will also touch upon where the college is at today. These are going to be probably our 3 strategic drivers as we move forward over the next 5 years. And the first thing to really emphasize, and which I think many of you will have experienced during your time at Pearson, is what we're calling place-based education and a focus on sustainability and climate justice. I think in coming to the college, and I knew the college well before I arrived, everyone had a consensus by saying if we were going to focus at Pearson on what are its strengths, what are its advantages, everyone would say place, the campus, the location. But that's a very broad definition in terms of land, sea, sky, people, aesthetics, and ontology. It's not just necessarily an environmental education agenda, but it's the distinctive element of Pearson that we have through the UWC network. And it's also about maximizing our location, our resources, our partnerships. And as you can see underneath it, probably very importantly, our reconciliation agenda, working with Indigenous knowledge, Indigenous people, and Indigenous epistemology. But probably running alongside this, and I think it has been a feature certainly of my summer, of the past 2 summers here in the Pacific Northwest, the notion of addressing climate issues is becoming, as people say, the existential imperative. It's just the manifestation of climate change is getting more and more acute and dramatic, and therefore the need to address it as a priority becomes more and more important. So that's also what people are talking about here. And that's not just to do with the education and programming, that's to do with our entire operations, about wanting to be sustainable, to reach net zero operations, and to model a sustainable a business, I suppose you might say, or organization with that. Tied closely to this is our second driver, which is reconciliation and the broader diversity, equity, and inclusion agenda. We're making a case that the two things are inextricably linked. It's something I'm doing with the wider UWC movement in saying that in addressing climate and addressing climate action and the need to prioritize that, we are also prioritizing a UWC mission of equity, an international equity, because we believe that the results of climate volatility will play out through a DEI lens, meaning already in the Southern Hemisphere, there's an amplification of the impact more than there is in the Northern Hemisphere, even though none of us can escape it. And I think it will just magnify issues of migration and resource management. So the things are linked. And of course, the other thing that's come to our notice in this part of the world is that many of the voices around how to effectively steward the environment are coming from indigenous groups who have lived in particular locations for thousands of years and have the wisdom and the ability to talk about how you manage a forest, how you manage a coast, how you manage a resource. And of course, that's also being amplified. So our reconciliation action plan, which is published on our website, our commitments to those actions are also going to continue to be a huge part of our strategic direction, and it will actually support our climate action work, as it will support our wider diversity, equity, and inclusion work and anti-racism work, which is another important part of our next 5 years. And I think the third strategic driver here is how will this all work in terms of our student population and their education. Well, of course, this is all part of another direction we're going in, which is to amplify student voice, student agency, decision-making, advanced leadership training, and a focusing on competency development, which obviously everyone is saying is critical, in terms of making maximum social positive impact. The competency frameworks that schools and colleges need to focusing now are well established. And this is more than just perhaps the competencies that are developing through a traditional IB diploma. It's a competency that we have to work on as a college for the whole experience, the wraparound UWC experience the students have. And a part of that is also what we're doing with changing our entire decision-making operation to something called a college assembly model, where students will be involved in every single element of significant decision-making in the college. So more of that later, but that's the quick pitch. And I think what I'll show you now on the screen is, how do we get there from the world that you know? I mean, the United World College that you joined, which had the same mission or a similar mission and the broader mission. How do we situate that? If you can see on screen, the statement again there, which is clearer about the fact that an emphasis on sustainability and Indigenous reconciliation also honors our commitment to peace, intercultural understanding, and social justice. Our mission does talk about making education a force for a sustainable future. And I would say unashamedly, we are emphasizing the sustainability element as being our focal point at Pearson. And I think if I scroll down to a fleshing out of a vision statement, as I mentioned earlier, this prioritizes social justice. This is a global problem that requires a global solution. And that the idea being that the model of bringing students from over 80 countries together in one college, which Pearson is still doing as it was in your day, then it was framed around the Cold War context. The United World College movement was born out of almost the United Nations mission to say, look, if you bring people together and they live together, then it accelerates intercultural understanding and it accelerates the chances of those people playing a crucial role in peacekeeping. Now we can say we need that same model of bringing people together, but to solve the biggest crisis in front of us, which is the climate issue. And that by bringing those people together, we are really modeling what needs to happen, because it can't be something that will be solved through the national politicking or a national agenda. It has to come together. We'll be seeing this in the COP26 climate conferences coming up in November. I think that's now going to be a massive event because, of course, there have been promises made in the past that haven't been honored. So this is an opportunity. So I think that the UWC model is well placed for that. As it says, is the crisis demands that we pursue solutions through many impact routes as well. So it's not just about the diversity of students coming from different locations and perhaps going back to those locations and working on this agenda, but it's also in terms of the diversity of their skills and their interests. So we need entrepreneurs and scientists. We need change makers in the financial and resource sectors. We need leaders in technology and global health. We need collaborators in policy making in both the private and public sectors. So we will not find our way out of the climate crisis with the same tools, approaches, and politics and jurisdictions that brought about the crisis. And I think, as we've seen with the IPCC report that came out just last week, the International Panel on Climate Change, this requires immediate action. So I think one of the things that's exciting that we'll see in a moment about our work around developing a new climate action leadership diploma as a parallel pathway for our students is when we connect with our colleagues in universities at Royal Roads University down the road, or at University of Victoria or Vancouver Island University. And some of these universities are already driving on graduate level master's courses in climate action. Really, people are saying that's too late. We need younger individuals to be equipped with a mandate, a mission, a philosophy, and the skills at an earlier age, so that they can make a quicker impact rather than it being something you might do in the 8th, 9th, or 10th year of your study. So a high school stroke university approach to this is actually gaining a lot of traction when we talk to people at universities. And I think it could be framed up in that statement: the world needs a Pearson United World College approach more than ever, because the solution is already enshrined in our existing values and learning approach. So even if we're looking at our values at Pearson, we state that we want a sense of idealism, action and personal example, a respect for the environment, compassion and service, and that learning will be transformative, experiential, holistic, intergenerational, inclusive, and place-based. And I think I would pick out from that the notion of intergenerational. I think what we've learned from our Indigenous partners, from the Sianu First Nation, on whose land Pearson College is, and from the land from which I am addressing you as way of an acknowledgement, is they will tell you that there is enshrined in those cultural practices an intrinsic intergenerational respect in terms of learning from the elders, but also the intergenerational way of talking about the environment and sustainability. And I think that's really, really important. The first people's principles of learning that we've borrowed, which is intimately linked to our Sianu partners here, but also other Coast Salish Indigenous groups, is that famous statement from the Iroquois Confederacy many, many years ago, which is that any decision you make as an organization, as a country, as a group, needs to be tracked through 7 generations of impact. And it's woven into an Indigenous epistemology. And as the famous anthropologist Wade Davis would say, if you took that one statement and applied it to politics, to business, to anything, and said you can't make a decision in the boardroom or in the cabinet until you've decided that it will have a positive impact for 7 generations, it will probably radically alter many practices currently that we see. So the intergenerational responsibility and approach is a key part of what we're talking about. And I think that's the kind of thing we would amplify. And so, yes, our strategy has a focused interpretation on this particular agenda through an Indigenous lens. And we want to lead this amongst the UWC movement by amplifying our access to Indigenous knowledge and our Indigenous partners. But it's not exclusionary. This is not something where we're saying that if you're a student anywhere in the world and you want to apply to come to Pearson, that you're forced into a kind of climate agenda. Absolutely not. This is an addition. We're talking about, we have a place-based campus and we want to focus our impact agenda on this. But of course, it could be that students are coming still to do the IP diploma, and they would still be moving into a different kind of career with a different emphasis. It's not an exclusionary agenda, but we are saying that we want to focus our competency frameworks and focus our social action and our service on that agenda because of our location. And so if I track down here and have a look at some of the statements on our strategy that hopefully we'll be able to finalize and print and have available for everyone to look at, by November. is that we'll be looking at multiple curriculum pathways that reflect different student interests, and also thinking about, well, look, even if that isn't your thing, how can you contribute in terms of your skill set whilst you're at Pearson in terms of our focused social impact and our service impact. And I think, the other piece here, and this is what we've got in our climate action leadership diploma, when we're talking about attracting students there, that, it does actually encompass so many different elements, whether you're talking about an interest in inequity or conflict or social injustice or well-being, they're all in that. But of course, it's worth stating, because often people make the assumption that in this agenda, even academically, that it's all about ecosystem science. Well, in fact, of course, it's not. It's about economics. My current reading this summer has been this wonderful book called Indigenomics by an economics professor who's looking at how you take indigenous knowledge and use that for a brand new economic framework. And she's a professor at Royal Roads down the road. It's a wonderful read. But we've also got the fact that it's also aesthetics, it's also philosophy, it's also technology and language and experiential learning. So it's, it is a very multiple interest agenda. So Pearson helped to write the UWC COP26 statement. I've got a link to it there, but I think if you are interested, you just drop onto the UWC website, you will find the COP26 statement, and the statement we helped to write there would probably give you a bit more detail about that. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, this is an agenda that isn't just about programming. This is about our financial operations. This is about our engagement agenda. This is about everything we're going to be doing. So, I'm going to touch a bit more specifically now on the education and programming and well-being, because that reflects the questions that we received. But we do have, a lot more to say that I won't say it in this presentation part, but you can please ask questions around how do we create a net zero campus? How do we create an operational and facility that can do that? What is the most effective way of doing that? How can we do that in a way that educates the students at the same time that we're actually doing that? That will be something that we can address in the questions too. But how does this look in the specific? We've got the fact that from 2022, we hope, fingers crossed, with IB authorization to be running 2 IB pathways. So it'll be the first time that an alternative curriculum has been introduced at Pearson since its inception. So this will coincide with our 50th anniversary. So that will be called the Climate Action Leadership Diploma, but it is actually a program that is housed within the IB framework. So it's called the IB Career Program, the IBCP. So it comes with the matriculation credentials and the authority and the reassurance of being an IB pathway. And there are many institutions that are already running an IBCP program across the world. I was involved in setting one up many years ago in Hong Kong. And it enables you to specialize. That's really what we're doing. And we're doing that in partnership with Royal Roads University and their incredible department in terms of climate action, and Vancouver Island University, whose president, Deb Saucier, is an alum of Pearson College. And she's someone who's really, really keen to enable us to access undergraduate credit level courses that can be woven into this course. And we're excited that on both of those fronts, we're going to be able to create a course in climate action using those experts and those academics to do that. You can see there on that slide, there's other pieces here around that in terms of access to applied learning and entrepreneurial social innovation facilities. That's the other exciting part. If we can access the resources at Royal Roads University and VIU, it will give our students that additional enhancement that perhaps we don't offer at Pearson, as you will remember. It is an incredible place, an incredible location. We are looking at the moment designing a social innovation lab in the next 2 to 3 years. But I also think that we would be foolish not to utilize the facilities and partnership opportunities of institutions around us. And that also includes, of course, our connection with Indigenous elders, collaborators, and First Nations educational expertise too. I've already started the work of amplifying this through the UWC network. We want to be able to offer this course and be able to place it on something called the Global Campus Platform, which means that other UWCs will be able to access those modules if they find that it's an equally compelling course for them to do. And that is being received already in a very excited way from many of the colleges, across all the way to Isaac in Japan. So, I mean, some of the nuts and bolts here, we have to go through candidacy, which we're doing right now to get authorization to run this. And I'm very confident that will happen. It needs to be funded. This is an additional parallel pathway, which we need funding for in terms of additional costs for the partnerships, the universities, and additional costs for the administration. But we believe that will come in. We believe that the case is very compelling. It's a very strong pitch to make to our supporters that, this is the biggest thing in front of us. If the UWC movement was going to have an impact right now, utilizing its international base, this is it. And so I believe that we can make this a very compelling case to our friends and donors. And so we will be doing that with the engagement team in the next 12 to 24 months to make sure that we've got the funding in place to make this a success for our students. We are currently writing a presentation and video that will go to all the national committees in the UWC movement to say, look, if you're interested in coming to Pearson, yes, you can continue to do the IB diploma, and that's great, but we're also going to be offering this parallel course. So, if you've got an interest in this agenda, please come, we want you. This is the place to do fantastic climate action leadership work. So we're doing that right now. We're also open to point right now, we're interviewing for a new position on our leadership team as for an Indigenous educational leader, somebody with great expertise who can help not only support this particular program, but our other mission here is to actually become more attractive for Indigenous students. We really want to have a greater number of Indigenous students to join us from within Canada and from outside Canada. And I think having someone on our leadership team with that context will help us to make that case more compelling and reassuring. We obviously need our new coordinator for this course. And we also need to make sure that we've got the funding and the strong partnerships with those two universities that I've mentioned. Though these are things we have to work on in the coming years. And, just to put this in context, to start with, we're only probably going to be talking about a modest number of students, 10 to 25. But we then believe when the program is up and running, it will sell itself. I think it will be where there will be students who believe that this is outstanding and they will want to come to do this. Some of the big questions I imagine that might be in your mind and many others across the alumni network and as parents now is, is this going to enable them students to access top universities? Will they get their Davis scholarship in the US, which is an incredibly important element of a UWC education? And the answers are yes and yes. It is a compelling course that is already out there, that has been successfully run. Take a look at Renaissance College in Hong Kong that have done this in partnership with the Rhode Island School of Design. And you'll see that students who graduate with the IBCP graduate and access Ivy League universities, Russell Group universities, top universities, as well as others. So we don't believe there will be a deficit there. It does require a bit more work on our part to make that case for the universities, but we've already done the homework in terms of our Davis partner universities in the US. We've already done that. They are absolutely comfortable with students arriving from UWC with an IBCP, and they will be in the same situation in terms of competing for places as if you arrive with an IB diploma. And the other piece here is that the competency framework is an incredibly sophisticated piece of work that we're piggybacking on the Royal Roads Department for that. It's an incredibly compelling framework for future employers in terms of the skills that students will go through. But we also want to make that framework available to all students, those doing the IBDP as well, so that they can actually get the benefit of this. So it's not just for a separate clique of a small number of students. Everyone will be able to access the framework and take advantage of it as well. So we're hoping this will be something that will wrap around the entire cohort. And I think shifting gear away from that piece, the other piece I think that reflects where we are and where we're going, and the questions that came in from alumni around, safety, around student agency and voice, around, making sure that students are amplifying their position and they're actually fully involved in campus life, safety, and in terms of decision making, and in terms of the DEI agenda, etc. One of the unintended benefits of COVID and our operation last year was, of course, you can imagine we had all of our students locked on campus. Imagine that. To cast your minds back, you're not allowed to leave the campus at the weekend. You can't get off campus even for a coffee at the marina or getting on a bus and going into Victoria. You can't actually go into each other's houses. So there wasn't any house mixing. When you eat in the dining room or the dining hall, which would be a fundamental part of the experience, where you would eat with adults, faculty, house parents, administrators, people in the finance department, that couldn't happen. Eating could only be in a particular way on a table. And so, and then people weren't allowed to go home during the winter breaks. We had to keep them here. So as you can imagine, the mental health issues amplified. And so that was a challenge, but it brought to the surface things I think that we would have needed to have done anyway, but it accelerated it. So we are committed through that experience, through resource and board approval, to do a number of different things that I think are really going to amplify student support, student welfare, student mental health, student safety, and also improving the training of everyone, all staff and faculty, in terms of how you do that with a diverse model of students from all over the world, because there's a particular challenge with that, and there's a particular skill set and awareness that comes with that. So we're introducing a brand new core course into our timetable for all students, which is focused on well-being, self-regulation skills, mental health, issues of consent, issues of language, injustice, conflict resolution, but also the competency framework. That will be where that will be introduced as well for all students. So a course that's dedicated for the very things that have become more and more important for young people and as they move through the world. We have got this radical new decision-making situation that we started last year. I listened to students. We borrowed a model that was introduced at MUCI, United World College, Mahindra in India. And it's a bottom-up model saying, okay, we're now going to commit to making decisions through committees that have mandated student presence in every committee. That's a committee for operations and facilities, a committee for educational programming, a committee for engagement and outreach, a committee for experiential learning, a committee for student welfare and well-being. Any significant decision that occurs will be done with the involvement and support of students through that model. And I felt it was incredibly important to do that, because there was a little bit last year, probably amplified by COVID, of a kind of us and them. And we're thinking, well, come on, if you're here at a UWC, we're all here for the same reason. We're here, we're mission-driven people. You're at the college because you believe in its mission. And you're at the college because you want to maximize the opportunity to make a positive difference. And that's the same for administrators as it is for students. So how do we work together in solidarity on this rather than working against each other? So let's bring you into the decision-making. And it was something, that we landed on this phrase to try and avoid what we call abstract activism. If a student would be constantly critiquing, but without the full understanding of why decisions were made, you have to be brought into that, brought into the complexity. And that itself is going to be an incredibly important part of student leadership development and decision-making development. If you're involved in the complexity of the decision-making of an organization, especially one now that's committed to net zero operation. So that's going to be interesting. How do we do that? That's going to involve a significant, partnership with students. Part of that assembly is an ethics committee. So we have, students working with BIPOC faculty and staff members to say, right, any issue relating to perceptions of injustice or equity will go through that committee. And that will be, again, student-led with us. And also as part of that, we're going to form, and we have formed and are forming, because we're getting more members in, an anti-racism, diversity, equity, and inclusion working group with alumni as well as students. Benoit is in the process of making sure that alumni are aware of this and can actually volunteer to join us. We do need to keep it manageable, of course, but we're looking for alumni who actually have specific experience of working on this agenda professionally, maybe within their own sphere and profession, so that we can actually gain that insight and expertise in terms of how do you create a 21st century institution, particularly UWC one with the diversity that we have, that is fit for purpose and is, we can say, look, we're doing everything we can to support that agenda. And I think there are other things there, more nuts and bolts about how we're changing our appraisal process for faculty and staff to make sure that includes 360s, and that there's a really good qualitative process, shifting away from the quantitative one about how we evaluate and move forward and support with professional learning. And also the training we're doing this week and next week, for example, in the week after, around trauma-informed practices, around mental health, around operating a campus with diverse student populations, around challenging microaggressions. These are all things that have come out from the last 12 months, which I think are significant changes, and we're already running with them, and we're committing to them over the next 5 years. So that's the same thing I've got there on that slide. Already made that. Our transcripts are going to change. Our reporting is going to change too, for how we capture some of these things for students. As some of you all know, there's huge changes in the world of education around what's called micro-credentials. Micro-credentialing, even using blockchain technology for changing the way in which you evaluate education and you evaluate a student, and how you present a student to maximize their impact in the world of employment and the world of change. And so we need to catch up with that. So that's what we're going to be doing too. And there's a bit more there. I'll leave it at that point because I think I want to leave time for questions, but this goes into a bit more detail around some of the things I've already mentioned, around how the core course, around how the DEI working group, how the leadership competency framework, and the training is all part of that agenda that we've started. And I think one of the things maybe to leave you with, just in terms of this pitch before we take questions, is making education a force is something that Benoit helped me to look at, going back and looking at past brilliant speeches made by educational leaders at Pearson. I think the need for a force, education to really perhaps drive the change that needing is very, very compelling. I think where we are, I know it's probably the same everywhere, but where we are right now, in terms of being literally surrounded by forest fires everywhere we look, and we already know that the pandemic as a zoonotic infection was probably largely created also by habitat loss because of our closer and closer proximity to mammals and viruses that we don't have immunity to. That's the same for Ebola and for SARS and many other zoonotic infections. So all of these things are interlinked. And I think being able to make that case for a UWC education focusing on this, I think is really, really important. And I think we're gaining some traction, not just at Pearson on this, but across the movement. So I'll be interested to hear any of your thoughts on this and anything else that we haven't addressed. I do have your questions or points in front of me. Let me go remove the screen. Stop share. There we go. And
Craig, if I may.
Yes, I haven't been able to see the chat, I'm afraid.
And I'll just read out the questions as they came.
Yes.
The first question came from Simon Guillet. Craig, what are the kind of challenges that PC faces today? Or if I can go one level down, what keeps you awake at night when you think about the sustainability of PC?
Yeah, good question. Many things keep me awake at night when I think about Pearson College. I mean that in a positive way, but yeah, okay, look, the economic model of something that when I was growing up was called a sixth form college model. And this is what the UWC models were based on, an old British sixth form college model, where you take the last 2 years and you have, student cohorts of anywhere between 160 up to 200. And you're doing that in a boarding school operation on a big campus. So the costs of upgrading the facility, the costs of maintaining the campus to making it fit for purpose and making it safe increase every year. As many of you will know, in the world of work right now, because of COVID, all the costs have skyrocketed. So all of the maintenance and facilities work we're doing right now, the last projects in changing our roofs to make them more fire resistant is just being completed, but the cost trebled this year because of issues around the supply. So the costs every year of maintaining the campus increase. And of course, the economic model is the worst model in education. So from a business point of view, in terms of economies of scale, we are very vulnerable because when you've got greater economies of scale, if you had a cohort of 500 plus, that tends to allow you a bit more wiggle room. And so we are committed, and now I think it's really important to say this to the alumni, we are committed to doing everything we can philanthropically, both ourselves and within the movement and with the national committees, to provide as much financial aid as possible to ensure that we maintain as much as possible our scholarship commitments. That's part of what makes us different and distinctive. But all of this is happening against the backdrop of rising costs and the fact that it seems that we have to work harder every year to achieve those goals. So that's one thing to be really honest about. I am looking as a new head coming in at any creative ideas around revenue generation above and beyond what we're doing. I believe that our philanthropy team, which includes people on this call like Carly and Benoit, are doing an outstanding job in connecting with alum and connecting with our wider community. And according to the metrics we have, they are doing extremely well. But there's a limitation to that resource, you might say. We do everything we can, but then are there any other revenue ideas? Anything creative that we could be doing as a Pearson College entity to generate the kind of revenue that we need to give us that headroom? We've got really good alum working with us on investing our endowment funds in the most fruitful and productive way. And we're opening up this discussion around, does anyone have any contacts with, maybe given what I've just said about the Climate Action Leadership Diploma, and perhaps us being the first high school in the world, if you put it that way, of 17 to 20-year-olds that will be running a program like this. We're not aware of anyone else doing it. So could that be something we could throw in front of an individual, an organization to get additional funding? So that's one of the things that keeps me awake at night is I think this model is amazing. We're all committed to it. We will love it and we want it to work. But it is a difficult one.
I'd like to ask if Sibongile has anything to add or to comment about her own question. And perhaps before that, Kate, you had a question. Go ahead. You can ask it yourself.
Thank you, Benoit. I was just very interested in your college assembly model, which I think is a really interesting innovation and really exciting way for students to learn and gain more skills outside of the academic range. I'm wondering, how do you choose or get students to volunteer or assign students to various committees? And how does that reflect diversity within the school? And because I can see how it could be self-editing in some cases.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's a great question, and I've learned from the students. I mean, because their way of doing this has been a true education for me. They refuse to do any voting for this exactly the reason you're saying, and they come up with a constitution that is trying to, at all times, trying to remove implicit bias, and ensuring that it's almost like a blind application, and there are protocols and procedures. In fact, the only way we intervened with that was to try and just make them a little bit less intense in that front, because of course it was paralyzing decision-making because of their absolute commitment to trying to make sure that they drove on equity. And so, yeah, it's a non-voting approach, and it's one in which the college assembly model, as well as having representatives, in a circle that discuss any of the findings from the committees, is brought back to that, must have as a standing members 3 DEI members, and how those DEI members were elected was another project in itself in terms of trying to ensure that there is diversity within the diversity representation. So yeah, there is actually a constitution that we will publish on the website. I think that as long as the students are happy with that they've written, and they had a constitution writing team that took 6 to 9 months to do that. They borrowed the Mahindra model, they adapted it and changed it, and I think you'll see from that they've tried as much as possible to borrow best practice to address those very issues. This is not a set of committees that the school leaders or the head handpick students to join it in the way that some from the schools I've worked in the past, where you have that kind of traditional prefect or school leadership model, which when I was in school made me run away from it at high speed. I thought, I don't want anything to do with that. I don't want to be the head stooge. And so yeah, they're doing that as much as possible. And I think I'll encourage them to put it on the website so that people can look at it. It's very weighty tome, but I think it's also reflects what you would expect from UWC students.
Thank you, Craig. Might Sibongile ask her second question, please?
Thanks, Benoit. In fact, I posted a question, but I want to ask a different question, if I may. Craig, how do you feel that, how effective is Pearson's alumni network in supporting the school? Because, and I know it's difficult to evaluate effectiveness because it's got many dimensions. But here you've got an audience of the alumni, and we're here for a reason. And we would also like to know sort of like, how can we be more supportive as a grouping or as a belonging to the college?
That's a great question. And I think, look, any head or president of an educational institution, a university college, would always respond to that by saying, you value alumni engagement in terms of time, in terms of talent, and in terms of treasure, in terms of just full engagement. And we would be the same. Yes, and every head of college and president would say we would love there to be even more revenue generated from that alumni group equitably. You might say, you might say that every institution, when you look into it, you would see that there is a significant number of significant donors, and the dream is always to ensure that you get more alumni reconnecting with Pearson, 4,000 plus, and all of those alumni feeling comfortable donating what they can afford, so that we've got that full engagement. And I think that would be everyone's dream, the full engagement piece, where the data you would have is that any of the alum that Benoit trawls through his spreadsheets and would say, look, there's still X number who have had no traffic or no email or no connection. Can we re-engage them? Are there any alum that we've lost because they've lost faith in Pearson, or, a beyond alum who might just naturally drift away because of time of life, and where they are in their lives. And so I think that the engagement agenda is critical, that we reconnect with anyone that we've lost, we re-energize any alum that have felt that there's a philosophical departure from the Pearson that they love. I would love more people to have the opportunity to maybe hear some of the things I just said about what we're hoping to do, and maybe that will reassure people about the direction of the college. And yes, and that comes with additional funding, then of course it will reassure me in terms of giving me less sleepless nights about our economic fragility, which is definitely there. The college is running at a debt. There's no, you need to make that clear. It's not because of any profligacy, not a significant debt. We've reduced it and we will continue to reduce it. But it's the fact that, and trust me, I'm a very experienced, I don't mean to talk about myself, but I'm a very experienced school leader. I've worked in many IB colleges, particularly in Southeast Asia. And there is no profligacy in terms of the staffing, in terms of remuneration, in terms of the operations on campus. It's quite the opposite. We're one people departments. And so it's just a reflection of the fact that we're committed every year to using all of our resources to maximize student scholarship and support, so yeah, so all of those things, I think I believe, and I know this from just entering this whole world of climate action, for example, and Benoit, with his incredible savant brain, will tell me every single alum from the top of his head who are working in that agenda professionally. And you can see the amount of alum who are working in the climate action sustainability worlds, and the talented graduates we've had from this institution, there must be some idea out there or connection or way of securing some funding that we can't possibly know about because we're just educators and we're limited, but the alum might know about. And so I think that's another piece that would be, brilliant if we could have people connecting with us and saying, have you tried this? Have you done this? Giving us ideas for bodies to connect to.
Thank you. There was a question by Danielle White, who was the instigator of the Reconciliation and Indigenous Vision gathering last night. She had to leave, so here's her question. Will the Climate Action Diploma provide a high school graduation equivalency, or will it be considered post-secondary?
Yeah, that's the answer is yes and no. I think it's if we have students who arrive from countries and contexts where they don't meet the minimum requirements, say for, if they wanted to go on to study science at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver, they have to demonstrate, for example, a level of English literacy and mathematics that will satisfy the minimum requirements of that university. And so they can do that with the IBCP Climate Action Leadership Diploma if the two subjects they select from the IB are math and English. So it limits the selection of the subject. So the answer is they can do that. And we are thinking long and hard about that because we don't want inadvertently the Climate Action Leadership Diploma only to be of interest to those people who've had the advantage, like many of our Canadian students who arrive and they've actually met their high school equivalency and they could apply with that to a university without the IB diploma. So there's the flexibility in the IBCP pathway to enable that. So we can do that. So that's what we're currently working on with Becky Halverson, our university counsellor, to make sure that we're not creating a two-tier system around people who can access it. But it does mean that, say, if because the way that it works is you only have to take 2 or 3 IB subjects and the rest of the time you focus on your university Royal Roads VIU piece. If you've got your high school in the bag, it means that you're free to take any IB subject. But if you don't, probably you'll have to do math and English as the 2, but that's still fine as well.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? There are still a few minutes remaining. Craig does need to go on to the adult orientation, which is starting. Constance.
Yes, well, it's a candid question because it's not my field and I really don't know much about it from experience, but I wonder, like when you ask about fundraising ideas, for example, as a network and using, social media, like social networks, if there's not a way of raising some funds, for example, exchanging videos or experiences that we all have together, because I think whenever we meet at the reunions, I learn a lot personally from people. Like most of us haven't been in touch constantly, but when we get together, there's always such a rich exchange of ideas or the way you do a certain thing. And then I just wonder, in this world of, I don't know, YouTube or whatever social media, social networks, if I don't know how profitable it is, but I wonder if we cannot put something together that would have some publicity for the college, improve network, and also get some resources. So it's just a very basic, no-experienced idea, but why not?
No, please. That sounds wonderful. I think it's exactly right. Why I'm smiling is that I know that we are, as a college, we are not utilizing as effectively as many other institutions who have better resources. The capacity of video editing, video production that can be then put through social media networks. And that's not criticism of anyone here. It's just the fact that, as you will know, if we were a college of 2,000, like the last institution I worked in, where you have a department in communications of 9 people, and of those 9 people, 4 of them are very young in age, and they're incredibly tech savvy, and they're thinking about all this. They think in that same, they think in the world of TikTok, and they think in the world of social media, and they think in the world of bite-sized communications and utilizing. And I think it's one of the areas that we are not, we don't have that capacity. So if alum, or if anyone out there has that capacity and can create something and do something and work with us and say, look, why don't we capture this, do this video, collect alumni, do these video posts, we are totally open to that and would love that support in doing it. And then using that as a means of amplifying the work we're doing and reaching out to more people. Yes, 100%. Our director of communications is Brian Screwy, but Benoit and Carly are on this call, are also in that engagement, external engagement team, and you can pick that up with them. I'd love that support. It would be wonderful. You know, I think that's the kind of thing that alumni would have a lot of fun doing as well, because it actually enables more connection, doesn't it, to do that and have a project. And yeah, so thank you for that.
It could be anything, like from what we're doing here at the reunion, you know, some issue that we'd like to discuss, cooking lessons, or any whatever, you know. I think you can draw attention and interest on all those areas, I believe.
Yes, thank you.
Any other final question? Maybe I've lost track of TED Talk channel featuring alum. Yes, and we have those plans, of course, and I've put one in there. The next UWC Day / Global Affairs session will be led by alumnus and global ecology professor Corey Bradshaw, year 14. He's from Canada, but he's based in Australia, and he will be zooming in for that session. It will be recorded, it will be broadcast, it will be branded as one of the unlocked talks that UWC has been also recording over the past years, of which 5 or 6 of our own alum have been part of. There's been global speakers series, which was launched by year 3, Laurie Houston, who's already produced 16 presentations, which are all available on Vimeo. And about more than half of those are of our own alum, from our own alum. One of them is from Zia Abbas, who's on the call, who did an education panel together with other UWCers. So these right now are not being monetized, but there is certainly plans for thought leadership from our faculty members, from our own alum, from our leaders, to be broadcast more often, and perhaps somehow we'll discover how to monetize this. It's a great suggestion, Constance, and it's part of the plans, and it came through the survey we ran in August last year. And alum, of course, made those suggestions. I'm conscious of the time. It's 25 minutes past the hour. Craig, do you have any last, oh, we should take a picture. That's a great idea, Ruben. Just let's do the full gallery view, knowing that almost everyone is here. And let's take that picture. Boom, 1 page. And just a sec, I have to keep these. And here's the second page. It's been great having you. Thank you so much, Ruben, for being at the helm of this as one of the organizing members of organizing committee members. I know others like Meg and Tanya were also on the call. We thank them. And yes, let's have a follow-up session on Gather at PCUWC, which is our pilot project, which is a legacy of this reunion, having allowed us to launch this interesting, intriguing little campus, virtual campus that will allow you to bump into your friends and have great conversations. So thank you, Craig. Thank you all for your participation. See you on Gather. See you at other sessions.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you all.